Well, good evening and welcome in. I'm J.K. Perry, the Executive Director at High Five Access Media, and I'm joined today by Mike Wassenaar, who is the President and CEO of the Alliance for Community Media. And Mike has been gracious enough to come out and join us for our 40th celebration, which is coming up here soon. And we figured that while we had him, that we might as well sit down with him and hear all about community access media, where it's been over the years, the history, and how it got started. So I know it's a long history of community media, but if you can talk a little bit about, that history and kind of the culture that it sprung from, and how it got started and how it kind of blew up across the country.
Sure, I'm happy to, and happy anniversary. It's great to be here in Colorado and with you here at High Five. Access television is perceived to be a thing of cable TV, and it had its heyday starting in the 1970s and into the 80s and 90s, and it still exists today as a product of cable television. But access media has sort of a much more complicated history related to using technologies to help people tell stories.
Right.
Right. One of the first sort of filmmakers who worked in the space, George Stoney, who's commonly thought of as the father of public access television, got his start making documentaries in public with community groups to help tell the community group's story on film. Right? So you actually can see his documentaries in the Smithsonian. He's a storied filmmaker. He worked for many, many years at NYU. And really, as technology changed with the advent of videotape in the 1970s and Sony's delivery of video products that were much more accessible to educational institutions and nonprofits, really sort of was the beginning of the discussion of building alternative media practice at something that was called the Alternative Media Center in New York City at NYU. He and Red Burns are kind of the co-founders of that project, and that spawned a host of different centers across the United States that were devoted to community expression on video. Go back in time to the 1940s, and on the radio side, during the course of the Blacklist and the Red Scare, there was a host of activists that were peace activists that could not get their message out on radio because they were blacklisted. Well, the way to get around the blacklist was individual listener support at a radio station. So the first community-based radio station was in Berkeley, California, at KPFA, right?
Yeah.
And literally those Pacific stations began the concept first of listener support, which now we sort of associate with public radio. And public television viewer support. But the idea was having community voices being able to be unhindered by commercial constraint, supported by individuals that either volunteered for the radio station or gave money to the radio station.
Yep.
Fast forward another 20 years or so, there's a series of activists that started working in community-based radio that began community radio stations that were nonprofit licensees. They weren't associated with universities like public radio is across most of the United States, or was back in the 1950s and 60s. And these folks were devoted to individual expression of community groups that could not get access to the airwaves as commercial broadcasters or as journalists. So they began this sort of tradition of self-publishing on radio. So there's this parallel publishing. Okay, think as well about the 1960s and 70s. Another sort of radical invention of technology that occurred was the mimeograph. Right?
Yep.
Cheap publishing that could be done by individuals that had access to a mimeo machine. I know this sounds hokey to talk about.
No,
this,
it's media over the years. The printing press, it's all just on and on down the line.
So basically, a community-based or small press, fast press mimeograph machine allowed nonprofits, but also fan groups, artists to do zine culture.
Yep.
In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. That's community media as well. Like my first memories of community media were going to my dad's science fiction club in like 1971. And, you smell the fresh mimeograph. Because all the university students who were science fiction geeks would have like fan reviews of different things that had come out or movies that they were seeing, writers that they loved, or they would write their own fiction.
Fan fiction, sure.
And, you'd have these coalition parties on Saturdays where you'd have like 50 different authors, and you'd have basically these collating racks of fanzines, and you'd have a big frickin' stapler.
That sounds awesome. Sounds so cool.
So again, this is sort of like a community publication system, zine culture, all throughout the United States, community publication system. So we're part of a spectrum of community-based, expression-forward organizations that care about things like local culture,
yes,
freedom of speech, freedom of association, political expression, and civic education. Within the TV realm, within the cable television realm, organizations developed based upon what community needs and interests looked like. A lot of that was codified by Congress in 1984 when they passed the Cable Act. They basically said that local communities have a right to assess the needs and interests of their locale, and then ask the cable companies to support the channel capacity to be able to have those communities express themselves and educate themselves. It's sort of a radical thing when you think about where we are today. But again, there's this sort of interest that a lot of folks have now about trying to assess the needs and interests of local communities as they're trying to rebuild local news that's collapsed across the United States. A lot of that comes from that sort of germ of a thought from 1984 with the Cable Act, where basically organizations like yours were set up to reflect the needs and interest of the locality that you're in. And you think about now, you're going to be celebrating 1985 here in 2025. You were formed in the sort of the shadow of the Cable Act, right after the Cable Act passed. And the community determined that there should be assets put on the ground. There should be channels made available for people. There should be training programs to be able to support the community expression. Over the course of many years, there have been literally thousands of organizations like this across the United States. We kind of cringe a little bit at the parody of Wayne's World from 1992, right? And this
Between Two Ferns.
Between Two Ferns. There's a part of me that also loves this because it's a celebration of expression, and it's a celebration of the joy of individuals having the ability to connect with other people.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, sure, Wayne and Garth are dorks. Yeah, we get it. Right? But there's a certain joy that they have at connecting with people in their community from the basement, but then also to be able to be themselves and express themselves. Right?
Yep.
And it's interesting. I got involved in media work when I was in high school as a youth radio creator. I learned the joy of expressing myself in the media. But over time, as I worked with others, I realized that part of the joy that I get out of the work that I do is helping other people to express themselves. That there's this sort of amazing variety of voices in our communities. There's a host of unmet needs in terms of cultural expression, civic information that people need, even just sort of cultural preservation work.
Absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to support that as a professional working in community media means an awful lot to me because we're here in the Vail area. The work that you do reflects the culture and interests and civic life in Vail. You're not that different from Manhattan, even though you're a lot smaller,
Sure.
and those interests are going to be different. They have a group that basically is devoted to those local needs and expression. And I would joke about this a long time ago, is, there could be some hipsters on a Manhattan channel talking about something, all in black.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Friday night polka party in Western Wisconsin. Right. And the thing that is super valuable is you're capturing the local identity of people for people, with people in community. So, in a lot of our organizations now, we call ourselves community television or community media.
Sure.
We were self-identified for many, many years either as public access, or educational access television, in some cases government access television.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's technically called PEG access television, although no one named Margaret was ever involved with these organizations. At the end of the day, we represent community organizations that are devoted to leveraging technology to be able to help people connect with one another, help people understand the world around them, and help people to express themselves. Right?
Right. Well, and the thing that, I'm kind of interested in hearing from you is that, in a lot of ways, the internet and social media is sort of taken on a lot of that role of, that media. And, it's not community media, but people are connecting with one another and sharing with one another. In that vein, why do you think that community media in particular is still so important, even as we have people who are, going out and using social media to communicate with one another?
Well, first, YouTube doesn't have a podcast studio here in Vail. Right?
Right.
Facebook doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter doesn't. Let's multiply that by all the other communities that have assets on the ground helping people to communicate and to create together. Okay, so that's sort of thing one. We have a concentration of local assets to help people locally,
Mm-hmm.
and to actually create local content that's not going to come from Mars, Miami, Manhattan.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Right? So, yeah, you can connect with someone who, in a community of interest around the world. I hope that they're real. I hope they're not a robot.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Seeing people that reflect on issues that affect your world that you know directly
Mm-hmm.
matters.
Yeah. Talking face to face with people.
It matters.
Mm-hmm.
It matters. I think particularly, for example, about probably one of the most successful community-based organizations I know that they do radio, WWOZ in New Orleans. They're a worldwide recognized organization devoted to New Orleans culture.
Right.
Right?
And a lot of the music scene and everything there.
It's all based on local residents. It's not canned material. It's about the preservation of history and the living identity of the community. YouTube is not going to give someone that. You can obviously see videos created at WWOZ
On YouTube.
On YouTube.
Right.
But like, there's nobody at YouTube who cares about that culture.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, name a block, maybe in the block that you live on, JK.
I live on Bluffs Drive.
There's no one at YouTube who will create content about what's happening on Bluff Drive.
Right.
Right?
Because it doesn't sell.
It doesn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to sell to people in Rio de Janeiro. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be selling to people even across the state, probably.
But just because it doesn't sell doesn't mean it's not important.
Well, that's correct. And I think that's the other thing we need to focus on. The index of meaning in people's lives isn't always the amount of money you can sell
mm-hmm.
with advertising. And I think for community educators that do work in community media, for people who cover local government meetings, cover school board events, cover high school events, you're doing something very, very meaningful to capture life in a community and help a community understand itself.
Absolutely.
And that's like a value in people's lives if we want to embrace it. And that's I think that's also where the future of community media lies. We can use different technologies. We can use different platforms to reach people. At the end of the day, we thrive when we are making meaning with others, and we're connecting with others over something that's meaningful.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and I really appreciate you coming out to our humble little station, small but mighty, as we like to say.
I've been in stations in Maine. I've been in stations in Hawaii. I've been in stations probably in about 45 states. There are big, huge television studios in major markets. And I have been in someone's kitchen in Vermont where they actually set up a television studio in the kitchen with a green screen. The locale doesn't have to be fancy. What's important is that we use the tools to be able to make something that's meaningful for somebody. That's something I learned many, many years ago in radio, but it's also true in television and video. So I'm really happy to be here and celebrate 40 years with you.
Well, thanks again for coming out, Mike. Mm-hmm. Really appreciate you celebrating 40 years with us. And here's to 40 more years of community media here in the Valley. Thanks.
Thank you.